One thing I found interesting what that Chris said was the idea of the return ticket, which is when you're an immigrant. So, like when I got my Canadian PR, the visa that I was given was just one way, and then I also bought a one-way ticket. So it's different because when you're a visitor, you're like you sort of know that like you have a return ticket. You can always go back. So I don't like how they behave. I can go back. I don't like these things about the people. I can just go back home. Literally, I don't have to try to integrate into the society. But when you move to the place, there's no return ticket. You can't escape anything. You're there. But let's get into it. Welcome, man. How's it going?
Well, going well. It's winter, so I mean, obviously.
Wait, look, talking about winter, I think you all are still way better than we are. I mean, the weather is warm right now, but the last 2 weeks, like I was saying to you during the pre-show, the last 2 weeks have just been
Hmm,
really a mess. But
I can
let's
imagine.
just kind of dive straight into it. I think the first question I want to just get on with you was basically around like why Glasgow? I mean, people always think about, so Chris moved from Nigeria to Glasgow, Lagos to Glasgow to be direct, to be straight up. And people always move to London, the States, Canada. I mean, Canada is the new one now. Like everyone moves to Canada. Germany, people move to Germany, Australia, but not Glasgow. Like, I mean, like I why Glasgow, to be honest?
Well, yeah. To be honest, there's no. I really don't have a good answer in the sense that there was no particular reason. I mean,
Okay.
I just it was sort of like living Nigeria was an act of fate. It was sort of like
Mm,
adventure, get out, just go to the world and see stuff. And I think it was when I was just trying to look for certain things. And at the time, Glasgow just seemed to tick those boxes, being a place where that has rich culture, history, see classical buildings around you and that. So, I mean, if I knew about the weather, I probably wouldn't come, but I didn't know that part. Yeah, so it's I mean, and this is sort of like my second time in the UK. The first time I mean, I was pretty much in England, London, and all of that. So but now I just thought, okay, let me try and explore another place. So I didn't really have a particular reason. It's more like I wish I knew this much before making the move. It wouldn't have been. I suppose it wouldn't have been Glasgow, but you will probably say everything happens for a reason. So,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, so far so good. Glasgow is great. Glasgow is cool, and yeah.
I have two questions I want to ask, like kind of follow-up questions. Well, I like the point you make about classical buildings. I think one thing I really like about the UK is how, or a lot of parts of the UK, is how they manage to keep that balance of old and new. It's so interesting how they do that. So you come into a city, it's a modern city, but it still has all the trappings of history in it, and it just feels, I don't know how that feels like, but it does have. I wish someone had the word to describe what that thing does to you when you're walking around the city and all that sort of thing. But the question I wanted to ask you is more like, what did you think the country was going to be like before you moved, and then what was it really like for you? Like, what I'm just trying to find like A and B. What was it like?
So what I thought the country would be like
Like,
or was
yeah,
like.
yeah. What when you now got there? What was it really like? Like what? Because
Okay, well, there's a contrast. There's an obvious difference, but the
hmm
first, I just like I mentioned earlier, it was sort of like an adventure, which means that I didn't have any premonition. I didn't have any idea of what the country is at the moment, other than things like, okay, this is a place steeped in culture and history, and and all of that, and see great buildings and all everything you probably have heard about the place. So
hmm
there was no particular, and of course I came to study, so I
yeah.
came through that route. So it was sort of like just being a university environment, university community, discuss with intellectuals, engage with people who are creative, who are doing stuff, and all of that. So I came with that. That was about the only thing I knew, that I came with. But so far, the reality on ground, I can just see a sense. Number one, just like you mentioned that in Europe, you have all these, culture surrounding, surrounded by culture and all of that. I realized that the locals the very owners of these things do not really place much premium on these things. It's a case of, you don't appreciate what you have, that kind of thing. And I find it fascinating because I part of my thinking was like, okay, you'll be here, and then these people you can engage with them. Some of these things I know them, some of the history, some of the story, I'm familiar with them. And someone who is very, I would say, sensitive to aesthetics and beauty and all of that, right? So I was hoping that I would be having conversation with people who would tell me, oh, this is what you need to know more about this and all of that. Let's go out. I'm going to discover the referral. I found that I've just been the only one doing that by myself, and which of course you can't blame them. If you grew up with this kind of thing, you don't necessarily know what outsiders might appreciate in them, other than the fact that, okay, this is just natural, it's just familiar, right? So, but yeah, that's about it really. And also the sense that, I guess, as an outsider, you don't there are certain things you generalize from your lens outside, before coming in. And then when you come close, you now start seeing how stark certain realities are. So for
Mm.
me, I think the biggest thing, and I'm speaking almost politically here, is to come to the UK and realize that the level of rivalry between Scottish people and English people. Whereas outside, you just see the UK as one kind of entity.
Mm.
You get a sense that it's a combination of different countries or different kind of thing. But then
Mm.
you don't get to know the sense of how much, for instance, some people in Scotland are making the agitation for independence. And I'm wondering, no, I thought it's just meant to be. And then, so all of those things are like, okay, not necessarily culture shock, but it's sort of like eye opening to get the sense that, they have this kind of thing playing on here. Yeah.
Yeah, that point you make about that, when you come into a country, you're from when you're 1,000 miles away, it's like it's all the news,
Well,
the
single
media.
entity.
Yeah, you see through a lens of what people want you to see. When you now live in there and you start to experience it from the lens of the people on ground, it's always so eye opening. I wanted to ask a question about, or just talk about. You mentioned you had lived in the UK before. Did you come as a tourist or you lived in London?
No, it was vacation,
It
really.
was a vacation. Okay. So I was
Yeah,
going to ask, like, what's the difference for you between when you're vacationing and then when you're now, like, you're living in there? Like,
massive
does it feel
difference.
the same way?
No, no, no. That's a massive difference. The the lenses are different in the sense that, as someone who is on vacation, yeah, you're just here to just, the experience of fun, the experience of, you are not really letting down your shoulders and your guards. You are here, you're basically carrying whatever you already knew, and then just coming to get a sense of, so it's just pleasure. It's just have a sense of, okay, I'm here in the short term, and then let me just have fun and see what things are, and for people who are inclined towards, taking pictures and all, just tick those kind of travel boxes and all of that, so for someone vacation, on vacation, it's just a sense of visiting a place and staying, holidaying and all of that. But then coming in a different way as someone potentially settling down, in the it's a different thing, because then you are closer to being alone than being someone who's just, on vacation. So you get to have a sense of what the locals are experiencing. You are shopping with them. You have, you start getting a sense of how things play out, the energy, the community, the sense of how things are done, the kind of food they eat. So you're almost, conscious of the economic realities as well. But as someone who is traveling, who is on vacation, you have your budget to experience fun. You're
Hmm.
not overly concerned about, what to buy or what not to buy. The more you can buy, the better, because you have all the money. But then as a local, you get into that, penny wise pound foolish moment, and all of things, and among
Hmm.
other things, in
Hmm.
terms of how the country is structured and how, where you stand within the grand, mix, where, which could
Yeah.
be, how do I fit into the economic space in this country? How do I fit into the political narrative? How do I fit into the cultural reality? And among other things. So there's a huge difference, massive difference, being someone who just merely traveled to, temporarily, and someone who is, thinking of settling down. Realities are different.
Yeah. I think for me, it was Canada was my first time in Canada, so there was no comparison. But like, I do know that you quickly just kind of on this. You know how when you're on vacation, it feels like you have a return date.
Yes.
So you can always escape from anything you didn't really
Hmm.
like. Okay, I didn't enjoy the hotel. I can escape from it. I didn't like the Airbnb. I can escape from it. I don't like how the locals behave. I can escape from it. But when you're living in it, you're like, okay, I have to somehow find my way to adjust.
Absolutely.
Um. So and then this for me is like people always say to immigrants, like, you know what, you're moving. It's a ton of opportunities and stuff. Like what's your take on that? Like the point on opportunities and like how do you have any thoughts around how people say like how do you go around spotting those opportunities as an immigrant?
Uh, well, I don't know how much opportunity I've attracted to be able to say that I have. But I mean, but I get a sense of that question. Like, and I would say also would depend on where the immigrant is coming from, right? There are some immigrants settling not necessarily because of opportunities. It might just be something as, living, changing environment. It could be for political reasons. So they are not necessarily it could be, even if you say economic reason, not necessarily because they are their present state. I mean, imagine someone leaving the UK for Australia, for instance, right? And like a proper British person
Yeah,
who is well to do here, maybe middle class, working in a corporate organization and is thinking of changing jobs and going to Australia. The drive might not necessarily be opportunities, meaning in the sense that they are lacking in the UK. It might just mean other thing, which might
yeah,
mean that maybe I'm probably tired of the culture wars. This is not the UK that I used to know, or there's something wrong about the politics, or maybe I'm a family person and I want my children to grow up in a different kind of environment and they probably assume that they
mhm,
maybe Australia or somewhere else can provide that. So that would the drive for that, the inspiration for that would not necessarily be opportunity. It will be something completely different, even though they are also settling somewhere. But again, we are Nigerians, so coming from a background where you can tell that I don't know, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I still maintain the ground that there are opportunities in Nigeria. It's just that you have to contend with a lot of dynamics to tap those to get those opportunities, and they are not the most charitable dynamics. That is the problem, right?
yeah,
So you now come to maybe somewhere else in Europe, anywhere in the Western world, you can easily understand what opportunities are, in the sense that it's easy for you to compare the barrier to getting those opportunities here to the barrier to getting the opportunities from where you're coming from. So I say to people here and there, you're applying for jobs and people get all these hundreds and thousands of rejections and all of that. Nobody ever talked about how the fact that nobody says the jobs are not available. The jobs are there in excess. You have this job in abundance. It's just that the what you have to contend with to get in those jobs. The fact that you have other people from other parts of the world who are also competing for these roles,
yeah,
right? And all of that. And then there is even the locals who have a certain kind of standard. So the jobs are there.
yeah,
So you just have to find all those opportunities, and also, I mean, how to spot them. And even if you spot them, it's just, I guess, the first step will be, and it doesn't have to be job in a real sense. Some people just want to, opportunities for them is running their own business, and they want to do that within a more
yeah,
structured, a more sophisticated environment, the ecosystem that allows them to
yeah,
run their business and all of that. So you have all of those opportunities. Again, you still contend with so many of the, regulation and whatever it is, and even who you are as a person, the kind of thing that you're able to do and how conscientious you are. So for me, my
hmm,
theory would be that the opportunities are there, right? It would just be how do you orient yourself in a way to attract them, which could include, which could
yeah,
require you maybe you're upskilling, you're changing industries, or you are trying to up your game in a way to make you stand out in the market, to say that, So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
okay, okay, and just kind of like a follow up on that, which is like what's your thought around this thing where people talk about inside out, where like the insiders don't necessarily see things as much as what the outsiders see, or the outsiders connect more dots more than the insiders, or the insiders have some advantage. Because I've spoken to someone before who mentioned something about how when you're an immigrant, you're dealing with someone who has really built a cultural moat or a societal moat in a way. They have access to funds, they have stuff. Like, do you think the immigrant has any advantage when battling with those sort of moats that locals have?
Well, certainly, yes. And I agree with that thinking. And my rationale for that will be that it, even outside immigration setting, it's just normal. Even if you have a guest in your house, you will be shocked that the guest will spot certain things that you are not able to spot, which could just be some random stain on the wall and all of that. The reason is because of the eyes are not trained to only relate with what is familiar. So they relate with what is new and they are able to spot what is new. So the eyes that are already trained what is familiar, we only stay within the familiar zone. So it is that same kind of thinking that I
Yeah.
think plays out when you have an immigrant who is able to say, oh, I just realized that people take this long walk from point A to point B. For them, it's normal. But then he says, no, why should there should be something to be done to cut down this walk. And then that
Mm,
connection happens. So it's just that having that fresh eyes doesn't necessarily mean that all immigrants have the capacity to spot opportunity. Don't get me wrong. There's a whole lot of personal, factors that I would say also play out there. People who are more open-minded, who are extremely creative, who are, how do I put it, who who are always hungry for new thing, they are likely to be inclined towards finding those connections on time and say, "Oh, let's do this, let's do that," right? And the locals are just like you said, because is their tough, is their that home advantage kind of thing, will will make them settle for what they are used to. Whereas the guy who is coming from somewhere else, especially if he feels that there were some kind of things he lacked from where he's coming from, he's able to use that lack to drive himself to connect dots that would seem strange or unlikely to locals. So the point for me is really just that it is not everyone that come to a deep new place that will find opportunities, but everyone that come does seem like there is that you really do have a sense if you wake yourself to that to be able to
mm,
make those connections. And of course, you then have to contend with a whole lot of things and say, uh, what are the barriers to tapping into these opportunities, which could come from regulation, which could come from culture, which could come from
mm,
a whole lot. It could even be political, and all of
yeah.
that. But then the locals already by default know. I can imagine if I want to run a business anybody coming from anywhere in the world coming to run business in Lagos, I can already tell how I will have the advantage of knowing what to go, how to do your CAC, how to talk to lawyers, in fact, the right
Yeah.
kind of place to go to set up this business, given whatever it is, like the nature of the product you want to sell. Oh, this is best in Abuja. You shouldn't be doing this in Lagos. You should do this in
Yeah.
Port Harcourt or what, those kind of local nuances. It's in
Mm,
itself is an
mhm,
advantage,
mhm.
right? Whereas the person coming from abroad might not have that, but can still recreate in a way that will surprise you that you as a local.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of all of those dynamics that plays on whether you've got a better eye and all of that, or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest take for me there is it's so easy to like. I think a lot of immigrants do this thing, or let me not say a lot. Some immigrants do this thing where they come and you carry on a victim mentality and all that kind of stuff. Like you have your advantages, just like the local has they have their own advantages. So it's important to know that, and then now decide what you want to do with it. Like, do I have an advantage? Yes, you do. Like you're a new person, you have fresh
Hmm.
eyes. Yes, the local probably has a social moat that you have to kind of build again, but let's stop feeling like, oh, you know what, I'm new here, there's nothing I can do, i'm I'm gonna struggle forever, all that sort of thing. Because you talk to some people and it just feels like they almost feel like, oh yeah, I'm doomed to be a second class citizen forever. But let's kind of go back to like I want to ask you a couple of, let's go back to the beginning of when you just came here. Like I think I'm going to just talk about like, what was your biggest challenge trying to settle down?
Well, I haven't settled down yet.
Yes, that's the right. I think that itself is valid, to be honest.
Well, okay. Well, a couple of things. I think number one challenge for me, but I don't know whether to necessarily call it a challenge or maybe it's some kind of a form of cultural shock, or maybe not, was the fact that I thought it was there's a case for running a business here. Like if you want to go into entrepreneurship, I want to run a startup, right? I've come to realize how the system is designed in a way that, except you are ready for the long game, especially in the early days, right? If you are not properly, how do I put it? If you don't have that leverage, that safety net that will sustain you, right? It's going to be very difficult for, which could be financial. Maybe you've got a pool of funds that you have already, and then give or take in the next 2 or 3 years, if I'm not making money yet, I can live on this money. This money can sustain this business, right? If you don't have all those kind of advantages, or whether you've got a dad or a mom with huge war chest of money and all of that, right? If you don't have that, it's going to be a big one. I didn't really know the extent to which that is a challenge. Like I just realized that, man, this is a thing. So because the pressure of having to take care of the everyday, you've got bills to pay, right? It's so high
Yeah.
on you that you're not able to juggle that with any other thing. Even though the other stuff is your ultimate dream. I want to run a business. I want to run a startup, right? Unlike, I would say, for instance, Nigeria, you see, I just realized how, I would say, in a way, it's relatively flexible, where you can come back home and do the same thing in your house, and continue, and you and your friends are connecting, right? But I just realized that I'm not able to see how possible that is. It just feels like, if you want to do this, commit to it 100%. And if you're going to commit to it 100%, you better have all the leverage, all the privileges, so to say, or safety net that would enable that to happen. Otherwise, you don't want to do it halfway or somewhere on the journey. You're like, I can't do this because I've got bills to pay and all of that. So that is one, I would say, it seemed to be, it's sort of like a shock to me, more than, because I thought it was going to be easy, to be frank. I just thought it was going to be easy. Like, oh, we've got an idea. Oh, 3 or 4 guys, let's come together, run this show. And I realized that they would like to do that, but then they've got things to contend with. And then that would
Yeah.
sort of slow down or make the whole idea impossible to pursue. And I think that's one that really stands out. The I guess the other thing might be, generally where I am is super cold, and somehow I just see how it disturbs your ability to network, your ability to to do all those, more social life and all of that, and
Yeah.
and that. But speaking of being immigrant, I think more like, because I'm an observer, right? I've been able to observe a lot of things. I've come to see how much it is wanting to immigrate, to emigrate, as the case may be. I think integration is another issue. Like, are you integrating
Mm,
with the culture? Some people, you maintain your
mm,
culture, and your
mm,
host country, your host community, you're not able to blend into the main culture, which could be anything. It could be in their
mm,
social justice system, their justice system, the government, the
mm.
political system, the cultural system. And that in itself can also be some form of barrier. But I've, through my observation, I've seen how much of that is a thing, where you are in this environment and you are not really integrating, even though you are here.
Mm,
And all of those things also determine some kind of outcomes, in a different
mm.
way. So for me, I just need all of these things, and I'm like, okay, yeah, these are, it's somewhat, you can call them challenges, really, because they tend to determine how far, one ends up going in the environment. So yeah.
Talking about the integration, just kind of digging a bit into that. Do you think it's a? I think it's a two-way
Hmm.
street. I think the society has to play a part in you in helping you integrate, and then the immigrant has to also play a part in integrating society. I think both parties have to play a part in that. And just so using your society, for example, which is where you live, do you think that it's a that there's that open pathway for immigrants to also try to integrate into society, or do you think it's just like immigrants just come in and society just says, find your way and
Well,
settle in as you wish?
yes.
And I don't know if it's the right answer. It's just like I think it's just like
Yeah.
what are your observations from from studying the past couple of
Right.
years?
Well, I think you made a valid point there, that it in a sense, there's a two-way arrangement there. And so I would probably come from the point of view of the fact that the host has invited you, has opened the door for you, is enough, is a first step into integrating you into the society. As to say, just come in,
Mm,
right? We want you, and then you're here. And the fact that you are there, it then means that to survive, there will be a whole lot of things to play with. Now,
Mm,
you can argue that some cultures are not easily to assimilate into some systems.
mm,
And you
mhm,
can also say that some people coming from where they are coming from, whatever they have, it might be very difficult to let go of certain traits. And then you
mm,
have all of
mm,
those things playing out in how they relate.
mm,
So, but then I would say that given what I've seen so far, what I've observed, I would say that the Western world is pretty much open to hosting people. Now, the integration is a different case because what integration is, I would say, is that you don't get to as a stranger, as a as an outsider, you don't get to determine, you don't get to call the shots for your host on how you want your life to be, even though it does not mean that they should
mm,
not be sympathetic, or compassionate to your
mm,
reality. But then I think it will be more, you don't want to seem like a control freak. Like, I'm here and I'm trying to tell you this is what I want. You don't get to determine the terms and conditions for your host.
mhm,
So your host can lay their terms and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what I think you can do. For you to integrate properly, these are the things you need to, respect our value system, respect the way we do things, respect our sense of, cohesion and how we resolve
mm,
tension and all of those things. There are
mhm.
things that are somewhat universal, but they can also be specific to locate certain places. So if you are coming into that system and you're not able to respect that, you're you're indirectly advertising, yourself as someone who is not ready to integrate, and which can cause problem.
Yeah,
And then they might also say that okay, the terms to integrate might be you. I mean, it wouldn't be far from you aligning yourself with some values. So otherwise, if you are not
yeah,
aligning with this value, you might as well just go back. You get what I mean? So it's a
yeah,
two-way street. I agree with you, but also the nuances there can also be the fact that there are there is a sense of you as the outsider. The proof of burden is on you more than the host. That's my thought. To say, oh, this is how they do things here. Okay, I respect that. I mean, let's look for a random example, right? Say, for instance, you're coming from a culture where people find it strange to stay on a long queue. You go to the pub, you go to the grocery store, you go at, in the UK, it's almost like second nature for people to queue, right? And you can also trace that to maybe the way they respect certain kind of orderliness, and therefore it manifests in the way
mm,
where, we are there on the queue. You want to get your ticket, you want to buy stuff, right? You have people who are behind you, right? I mean, ahead of you. So respect that. And you're probably coming from a culture whereas we can think that we should respect queues, but I mean, come on, we can also still beat the game. So if there's the tension, if there's a problem, now you end up imposing that style, that orientation on the UK culture in the name of, and then maybe there's not a problem, and you not think that they're not letting you integrate. No, you have a quality that is so strange and alien to their own, which is even negative to them, and you're forcing that, so it's not going to work. And a whole lot of things, if we want to go into on a more broad scale, we might be
yeah,
talking religion, we might be talking,
yeah,
all sorts of things that we can now bring into the open, right? So it's a two-way
mm,
thing, but I also feel that
mhm.
people, my argument would be people need to be more reasonable in how they how
Yes,
they how they approach
yeah,
this, in the sense that the host is the host, and the host have a set of principles and value system that is a way of holding their society together, and they have built this centuries, years. Now you coming
mhm,
from
mhm,
nowhere, and then just merely because they open the doors for you, you're now saying you can
mhm,
impose your supposedly incompatible system into
yeah.
them. There'll be pressure, there will be tension, there will be all of that. So for me, yes, I agree with you. It's a two-way thing, but then when it comes to it, there has to be proper pragmatic way of looking at those things.
Fair points, really strong points to be honest. And I don't want to get political, so I'll just move on to my last
All right.
question for you, which is, if you are landing in Glasgow today with the knowledge of everything you've learned so far, like what are the few things you would do to set yourself up for success?
All right. So that would mean I won't come here as a student. I won't come here as a student. And I think before coming, I would have tried to invest in some kind of relationship ahead of time. that would make it easy to navigate certain, things and certain areas. And I think, again, it will also depend. If I'm coming with my sense of, I just want to run a business, entrepreneurship and all of that, I would have been able to study the society, and the environment, the ecosystem properly to know how to get into it, and if you ask me, and I don't know, maybe this will be off record, given what I've experienced and my strange, I don't know how to phrase it better. I struggle with a Scottish accent. So now that I know this much, it will be a major factor for me. Like, do you want to really go to? I mean, it's a struggle for me. It's a beautiful language when you hear it's so musical, it has its resonance, right? But then ultimately, you want to communicate, and I see how much
Yeah.
I'm talking to the locals, and I'm not able, I know they're speaking English, but you're not able to make it out and say, oh, what are they saying, and that. So if I'm gonna have to come back, if I have to consider it and then think about, given what I know, that will be a major factor in my consideration. And the other
Mm.
thing would then be that hopefully I will be able to say, you know what, here I mean, they are great people, happy people, friendly people, but it will now be a case of investing actively in those kind of relationships that would help you navigate the environment, I mean the country properly.
Yeah. Great point. Sorry about the accident. I'm not taking that off record. It's staying on the pod. Staying on the pod.
Yes, you can. I mean, it's a beautiful language. I can't complain. It's just that the level to the point to which it affects my ability to communicate with them properly, and I don't want to offend them. You don't want
Yeah.
to offend people, and so and therefore there's a way it forces me to be more introverted that I think I am. Like okay, am I? So you're talking to someone, you're just picking bits and pieces of what they're saying so that you can sort of make sense of what they're saying. I don't think it's the
Listen.
healthiest thing, And then now imagine if you're going to have to be doing that at
Yeah.
a large scale. Maybe you're running a business and your customers are
Yeah.
these people, and so for me, there's a sense of, in a way, I think I'm better. Like if I on a scale of 1 to 10, I think I'm on the. I used to be so terrible, level 1, right? I didn't even know. I couldn't just make out what you're saying, but maybe now I'm relatively level 4 or 5.
You're
Yeah, I'm
improving.
improving, but it's been a drag, But yeah, that is it.
Yeah, it gets better. I mean, you know how they say it's everything is exponential. Like 1 to 2 is slower, 2 to 3 to 4 is
Mm-hmm.
slower, 4 to 5 and 6 moves faster than 1 to 4. Because you have a foundation.
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks so much for coming on this. It's always good talking to you. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chris because Chris is a really dear friend of mine, and it's always amazing talking to him. He's so cerebral. But yeah, as usual, thank you so much for just staying with me to the end of this. Please like, share, follow us. You're on YouTube, Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcast. And if you know someone who will find any of this useful, please just share with them. Have a beautiful day.